Hey everyone, it is Sean, the What's Up Dude. We are going to check out Lincoln's home. And behind me, this is the visitor center. You go in there, get checked in, and they will take you on the tour of Lincoln's home. We're going to go ahead and check everything out, have a little fun, and see what we can find. This is Sean, the What's Up Dude. We are in the theater room, and we're surrounded by pictures of Abraham Lincoln, his home, and historical pictures from his time. And we're waiting for the movie to start. National Park Service presents what we are about to watch.
We know him as the face on Mount Rushmore, through the words of the Gettysburg Address, the famous bearded statue of the Lincoln Memorial, the great emancipator, the 16th President of the United States. But before Abraham Lincoln was an icon, he was a man. And before he was a president, he was a husband, a father, a young lawyer struggling to make ends meet. Here, a born frontiersman transformed himself into a statesman. Under his folksy veneer, a man of intelligence, ambition, and deep concern about equality. He had arrived in Springfield alone, with no money, not even a place to stay. Here he would find all the pieces of his life: a wife, 4 children, a profession as a lawyer. Here, a young man would become Abraham Lincoln. And when he left Springfield 24 years later, he was headed for the White House and the pages of history. The year was 1837, and a young Abraham Lincoln was riding towards his future. Lincoln had already tried many of the jobs the frontier could offer: carpenter, postmaster, soldier, and surveyor. Now he was hoping for a new start in Springfield, with a law license and unbound ambition. Like Lincoln, Springfield in the 1830s was just getting started. It was a town on the edge of the prairie, with a few brick buildings, no paved roads, and hogs roaming the streets. It was a cross-section of the country: 1,500 Northerners and Southerners, whites and blacks, and immigrants. Thanks in part to Lincoln's work in the Illinois legislature, Springfield had been voted the new capital of Illinois. Lincoln had helped to transform Springfield, and Springfield would in turn change him. On April the 15th, 1837, Lincoln rode into town with everything he owned in 2 saddlebags. His first stop was a general store run by Joshua Speed.
Hello. How much would the furniture for a single bedstead cost? Mattress and sheets.
$17.
Speed later said, "I thought that I had never seen so gloomy a face. The tone of his voice was so melancholy, I felt for him." He suggested a way Lincoln could avoid the debt. He offered to share his room above the store.
That sounds good enough to me. How do I get there?
It's right that way.
It was the beginning of a lifelong friendship.
Well, Speed, I move.
The young Abraham Lincoln was off to a good beginning. John T. Stewart, one of the most successful lawyers in town, had offered him a job as a junior partner. Stewart hoped to win a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives, so Lincoln took over most of the legal business. It was a crash course in litigation. But Lincoln also loved politics. He was serving his second term in the state legislature as a representative of the Whig Party, making a name for himself as a forceful speaker. His low-key, easy-going, common-sense style appealed to many, and he soon found himself at the center of a growing group of friends. In the evenings, they would gather together to swap stories and talk politics at Speed's store.
We were out hunting the other day. Jones was hunting.
But something was missing. Mary Todd was the daughter of a well-known Kentucky political family. She had come to Springfield to live with her sister Elizabeth. When Lincoln met Mary, he was captivated by her looks, her ambition, her sassy intelligence, and her understanding of raw political power. The year was 1839, and Abraham Lincoln was dumbstruck. Mary's sister said,
Lincoln would gaze on her as if irresistibly drawn by some superior power. He never scarcely said a word.
Elizabeth thought they were a terrible match. But Mary saw a spark there that her sister did not.
So, how you been now?
Good. Looking forward to getting out of the house for a little while.
Me too.
And soon she and Lincoln were going out together, talking about marriage, until the day their engagement fell apart. Some said it was due to Elizabeth's disapproval. Some said Lincoln feared that without any savings, he would not be able to support his new wife the way her family had. Whatever the case, Lincoln fell into a depression. He remained in bed for days, cared for by his friend Speed. Lincoln wrote, "I am now the most miserable man living." But by the next year, Lincoln and Mary had started courting again.
I don't know what to say, but
And by the fall, he considered marriage again, even though he had a bad case of cold feet. He wrote Speed,
you have now been the husband of a lovely woman for nearly 8 months. Are you now, in feeling as well as judgment, glad you are married as you are?
And with this ring I thee wed.
Speed must have had the right answer, because a month later, on November the 4th, 1842, Abraham and Mary wed. Lincoln placed a ring on his wife's finger.
I now pronounce you man and wife.
Inside, he engraved, "Love is eternal." They started out living in a rooming house called the Globe Tavern. But the city was expanding in all directions, and so was the Lincoln clan. With the birth of their first son, Robert, they decided to move. Lincoln purchased a small cottage in 1844 from the preacher who had married them. Recently built at the corner of 8th and Jackson, it was a simple 1.5-story home. The cost, $1,500.
Oh, this is wonderful.
Yes.
But to provide for it and his growing family, including a new son, Edward, born in 1846, he would have to work in earnest. Lincoln set himself to his career with a passion. He wasn't just a lawyer, he was a circuit-riding attorney on the 8th Judicial Circuit. That meant that he traveled from town to town all through central Illinois, going from one case to the next. Lincoln would be gone for 3 months at a time, twice a year, leaving Mary alone for long periods to run the home and care for the boys. Meanwhile, Lincoln's career was taking off. He started his own law firm in Springfield. Juries liked Lincoln's down-home conversational style in the courtroom. He developed a gift for making words flow and a reputation for diligence and hard work. Lincoln's skills became evident as he appeared more and more before the Illinois Supreme Court. Leaders across the state began to notice this young lawyer.
Private property is
Combining politics with his legal business, Lincoln was starting to build alliances at courthouses across central Illinois. And it was just about to pay off. Lincoln's public speaking and the connections he had formed both at work and through his wife's family convinced him to run for a seat in the U.S. Congress. And when he won a solid victory and became a congressman, it was the biggest step of his young career. The young Lincoln was thrilled to head off to Washington. He brought his family with him, but they soon decided that Washington wasn't really a place for a young family. Abraham packed Mary and the boys back to stay with her parents in Kentucky and knuckled down to work. He voiced opposition to the Mexican War, but was soundly criticized for it. He proposed a bill to abolish slavery in Washington, D.C., and got nowhere. Missing his family, he wrote Mary and his sons heartfelt letters.
When you were here, I thought you hindered me in attending to business. But now, having nothing but business, it has grown exceedingly tasteless to me.
The strain of their separation was evident in Mary's letters as well.
How much I wish instead of writing we were together this evening. I feel very sad away from you. I must bid you good night.
Lincoln had pledged before the election that he would serve only one term. And so, in 1849, he found himself headed home, having had a lot less impact than he might have hoped. He seemed to lose all interest in running for other office and buried himself in his work. And then a tragedy hit the family. In 1850, their 3-year-old Eddie Lincoln came down with tuberculosis. He was a rambunctious toddler they all loved, but the disease hit him hard. For 52 days, he struggled and sweated and tried to survive. And on the 53rd day, he died.
His life here on earth was all too short.
The funeral service was held in the Lincoln home.
And that someday we shall join him.
Abraham and Mary were devastated.
Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no
To
evil.
fill the void in some small way, the Lincolns had another baby, their third son, William. Another son, Tad, would follow soon after. As the family grew, the work was pouring in. Lincoln became one of the most sought-after attorneys in the state, earning a very comfortable living for his family.
If convicted of thievery, he will be sent to the penitentiary. Gentlemen, what will happen to these children? I beg of you for this man's family. I rest my case.
But it took the passage of a brand new bill, the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854, to pull him back into politics. All through these years, America had been slowly tearing itself apart over one of the most bitter issues of the time, slavery. To some, it was a sin. To others, it was a way of life. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 was one of several stopgaps to avoid national conflict. It allowed slavery to continue in the South and the northern territories to stay free, until the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 changed everything. The new act said that any territories that joined the Union could vote on whether to become free or slave states, no matter their location. At the same time, a more restrictive fugitive slave law that had been passed several years earlier allowed slave catchers to capture and sell even free blacks into slavery. Suddenly, everything was up for grabs. Lincoln was outraged.
Mary, Douglas has managed to get the Kansas-Nebraska Act passed.
So Nebraska now has the right to hold slaves?
All the way to Canada. This repeals the Missouri Compromise. This is reckless. It's an outrage.
The law, championed by Senator Stephen A. Douglas, allowed the people of the territories to decide the slavery issue themselves.
Popular sovereignty, whether they wanted slavery in their new state or not. Can I count on your support?
Lincoln felt that since new territories could choose to be slave states, it could tip the entire country toward slavery. Lincoln began traveling to give speeches, talking out against the new act.
For although volume after volume is written to prove slavery a very good thing, we never hear of a man who wishes to take the good of it by being a slave himself.
Soon Lincoln was running for office again. The year was 1854, and he set his sights on the U.S. Senate. Lincoln was a popular candidate, but back then the Senate was picked by the state legislature, not the voters.
Order! A call for a vote. The vote for United States Senator.
Lincoln.
Lincoln. Lincoln.
Lincoln. Lincoln.
And while he had had enough votes to lead in the first round, he did not have enough votes to win a clear majority.
The only way to do this is to give our votes to Trump.
Mary watched with disappointment as Lincoln withdrew his name and allowed another candidate to win, for the greater good of opposing the Kansas-Nebraska Act. But for him, it was just the beginning. Over the next 3 years, Lincoln crisscrossed the region, speaking out against slavery. In 1858, he stepped up to formally oppose the man behind the act he hated so much, Senator Stephen A. Douglas himself. This time, Lincoln was running as a member of the rapidly growing new Republican Party. He came to the Illinois State House to deliver a warning.
Until a crisis shall have been reached and passed. A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided.
For the first time, Lincoln was stepping onto the national stage. And it was a series of debates with his longtime rival Douglas that would grab the nation's attention. 7 debates in 7 towns.
I hold that the Negro is not and ought never be a citizen of the United States. I hold that this government was made on the white basis, by white men, for white men, and their posterity forever.
The New York Evening Post declared, "The prairies are on fire."
I think the authors of that notable instrument intended to include all men, equal in certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. This they said, and this they meant.
Lincoln's Republican Party would beat Douglas's Democrats in the popular election by over 4,000 votes. But Lincoln would lose once again in the state legislature.
Order! Order! The votes have been counted. Mr. Douglas has retained his seat of the U.S. Senate.
But Lincoln would not give up. For the next 2 years, he traveled the country giving speeches. The cause of civil liberty must not be surrendered, he said, not at the end of 1 or even 100 defeats. If the debates with Douglas put Lincoln on the map, it was a speech at New York's Cooper Institute that would mark his arrival as a national figure.
If our sense of duty forbids this, then let us stand by our duty fearlessly and effectively. Let us not be slandered from that duty. Let us have faith that right makes might, and in that faith, let us dare to do our duty as we understand it.
It was a remarkable performance. He had taken a crowd skeptical of this frontier politician and turned them to cheering fans. Lincoln was not the first choice of many in the Republican Party, but thanks in part to the tireless efforts of many friends from Central Illinois working behind the scenes, he became the Republicans' nominee. A committee from the convention traveled to Springfield to read the formal notification of Lincoln's nomination in the parlor of his home.
This is such a great honor and most humbling.
Almost immediately, the campaign began in earnest. Lincoln became known as the rail splitter, an honest, hard-working man from the West. One part of his image came from an unexpected source. In October of 1860, Lincoln received a letter from an 11-year-old girl named Grace Bedell. She promised to get the men in her family to vote for Lincoln if he'd let his beard grow.
All the ladies like whiskers, and they would tease their husbands to vote for you, and then you would be president.
When Election Day rolled around, Lincoln waited on edge for the returns. He didn't hear till after midnight.
President-elect Lincoln, we've won New York.
This is wonderful, gentlemen. I know a little woman on 8th Street who would like to hear this. Thank you.
At 1:30 in the morning, Lincoln hurried home to tell his wife the news.
Mary, we're elected.
Oh, that's wonderful.
We're going to Washington. Oh, you should have stayed.
The celebrations began that night in Springfield. A native son had become the president. But there were not celebrations everywhere. With 4 candidates for president, Lincoln did not win the majority of the popular vote. And in some parts of the country, as the votes were being counted, he was subjected to negative portrayals in many newspapers. Just 6 weeks after his election, the first state would secede from the Union. Even as Lincoln was preparing at his home, working to formulate his new administration, the nation was falling apart around him. Lincoln was under extreme pressure to compromise with the South, to give in on the slave issue to save the Union. What should have been a period of celebration was a tense time, a time of uncertainty, as Lincoln held his ground. He wrote,
If we surrender, it is the end of us and of the government.
The day before he left Springfield, Lincoln returned to his law office and told his partner Herndon, "Tell our clients that the election of a president makes no change in the firm of Lincoln and Herndon. When I come back, we'll go right on practicing law as if nothing had ever happened."
Mr. President.
The following morning, just before 8 a.m., a crowd of townspeople gathered at the Great Western Railroad station to see off their favorite son. In an emotional farewell, the president-elect paid tribute to the town which had shaped him, the one home his family had ever known.
My friends, no one not in my situation can appreciate my feeling of sadness at this parting. To this place and the kindness of these people, I owe everything. Here, I have lived a quarter of a century and have passed from a young to an old man. Here, my children have been born, and one is buried. I now leave, not knowing when or whether ever I may return, with a task before me greater than that which rested upon Washington. Let us confidently hope that all will yet be well. To his care commending you, as I trust in your prayers you will commend me. I bid you an affectionate farewell.
Lincoln was leaving his home of nearly 25 years to lead a divided country. He could not have known how much it would demand from him. But Lincoln would draw upon lessons he learned in Springfield. 4 years of bloody civil war would test his strength, his determination, his ability to handle tragedy and keep on going, ultimately staying the course to guide the nation toward a new birth of freedom.
Our last speaker, one of the greatest presidents in American history, Mr. Abraham Lincoln.
Fourscore and 7 minutes ago, we, your forefathers, were brought forth upon a most excellent adventure, conceived by our new friends, Bill and Ted. These two great gentlemen are dedicated to a proposition which was true in my time, just as it's true today. Be excellent to each other. And party on, dudes!
As we walk through, you can see old historic brickwork is the original roads that used to be around back in Abraham Lincoln's time. A place to call home, you are standing in front of the house of Abraham Lincoln and his family called home from 1844 to 1861. Take a closer look and you will find a plaque in the front door with Lincoln's name on it. 7 years after he rode into Springfield on a borrowed horse with all his belongings and 2 saddlebags, Lincoln bought a small cottage that would grow right along with him and his family until it became a full 2-story house. This would be the first and only home he ever owned. The Lincolns lived for 17 years in this house. Lincoln's son, Eddie, Willie, and Tad were born in this house. Here, Abraham and Mary Lincoln's friends and neighbors gathered for Eddie's funeral in 1850. A familiar sight would have been Lincoln's closing his front door behind him as he walked to his law office. From this home, Lincoln's firstborn son, Robert, left for college in 1859. In February 1861, Lincoln closed the front door one last time as he left his home for Springfield, Illinois, for Washington, D.C. as President-elect of the United States. Ahead was the task to govern a nation divided by slavery and to preserve a government, as he later said, whose leading object is to elevate the condition of men, to lift artificial weights from all shoulders, to clear the paths of laudable pursuit for all, to afford all an unfettered start and a fair chance in the race of life. Lincoln's life in Springfield was an embodiment of that belief, the ideal that in a free society everyone should have a fair chance. So this is Lincoln's community that he used to live in this small little community. My hand will never be given where my heart is not. This is some information about Mary and Todd Lincoln. Welcome to the park. On May 1st, 1844, Abraham, Mary, and 9-month-old Robert moved into the little house on the corner of 8th and Jackson Street at the eastern edge of Springfield. This rapidly growing community was home to immigrants from Ireland, Germany, France, and the Madeira Islands, Portugal, as well as the free Americans and families from over 10 different states. Each was looking to build their life on the central Illinois prairie. We're going to go ahead inside into the visitor center and start our tour. Lincoln Home National Historic Site. This is the inside. This is the store. This is Theater 1 and Theater 2. They do show some movies inside of there. There's a statue of Abraham Lincoln. And of course, we have the sign for Historic US 66. November 11, 2026 will mark the 100-year anniversary of the creation of Route 66. The 2,451 mile was constructed to connect Chicago, Illinois with Santa Monica, California. There's a statue. This is the Prairie Lawyer. This is the Lincoln Home National Historic Site. This is a plaque giving you information. Lincoln Home National Historic Site is part of the National Park System, one of more than 380 parks that are important examples of our nation's heritage. So you can take a tour if you can.
Front of Abraham Lincoln's home, constructed in the year 1839 by Reverend Charles Dresser, the same minister who actually married Abraham and Mary. And when they first moved in 1844, it was just the two of them and their 9-month-old son Robert at the time. But it didn't look like this beautiful 2-story house that you see in front of you today. It looked a lot more like the Cornell house across the street. So 1.5 stories. And after Mr. Lincoln moved into this home, he spent 12 years here before he added on the second floor. He was just starting out his career as a lawyer and then a rising politician, and his family was also growing, so he needed the extra space and he had the funds to make it happen. Yeah.
Are we gonna see like mannequins of him?
Not in the house. No mannequins of him.
Okay.
That's later.
Great question, though.
That's later.
And so when he moved into the house, he also spent a total of $1,500 on it at the time. So we're going to go through the front doors, make a left into the parlor, and take a look at his experiences. Any questions?
So he bought it for $1,000?
$1,500, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, from the minister who married him and his wife. So really interesting transition. Yeah, so feel free to watch your step on the way down, and we can head on in.
All right, we headed over to Lincoln's home.
And right this way into the parlor.
Parlor room.
So this is the perfect place for us to begin the tour because this is where the Lincolns would have welcomed their own guests. They would have had a lot of parties and events and get-togethers right here in the front parlor. And then originally in the back parlor, this was actually Mr. Lincoln's master bedroom. After he expanded his home, he moved his bedroom upstairs, and then this became his personal library. And so, looking around the parlor, the majority of these black horsehair upholstered chairs are original, all except this one in the center. So these are the actual chairs that the Lincolns would have sat on and had their guests seated on. That marble tabletop at the end of the room is also original. And then this whatnot shelf in front of us is his actual whatnot shelf where he would display his knickknacks and his whatnots. And then in the back parlor, there's also a bookshelf, his actual bookshelf, and there's still a book in there that he owned. And then if you do look at these illustrations that took place from the year 1861, when someone did an interview with Mr. Lincoln to put an article about him in the newspaper, we do use these illustrations today to try to get the rooms to look as close as possible to the original, but there's no way to tell exactly what the color scheme was, so both the wallpaper and flooring are period pieces that were available at the time. And we got pretty close to the original.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
And then in the back parlor, since it was the master bedroom, this is actually where 3 of the Lincoln boys were born. Eddie, Willie, and Tad were all born right over here. This is also, unfortunately, where they lost their second son, Eddie, right before his 4th birthday of tuberculosis, and then they held his funeral right here in the front parlor. And the back parlor is also where 12 delegates came down from Chicago to officially break the news to Mr. Lincoln that he won the nomination and to get his official response of whether or not he wanted to move forward. And what do you all think he said?
Yes.
You would think he said yes. What he actually said was, let me think about it and get back to you. And then he spoke about it with his wife, Mary. They made their preparations, and then he sent a formal letter accepting. Yeah, so next we're gonna make our way through the dining room and take a look at their actual dining room table as you head on through, and we're all gonna meet in the sitting room. And you all do the necessary announcements.
This is the dining room.
So in the dining room table is original, as well as those chairs against the wall. And then this is a replica of the exact china set that they owned. And then we can all meet right here in the sitting room. So here we are in the sitting room, and just a reminder to keep a little bit of space from the walls as we move through the home. But this is a very different atmosphere from the parlor, as you can see. It's a lot more lively and a lot more colorful. And this is where the Lincolns would have spent a lot of time together as a family, bonded and played around together. And so on the right-hand side of the room, both this table and mirror are original items that the Lincolns owned. And then we did put some sewing supplies here because Mary Lincoln loved to sew, and she might be sitting right here at this table, mending up some garments that her sons could have ripped up while they were roughhousing. And then looking around the room, these chairs might look a little bit too small for Mr. Lincoln since he was 6'4" tall, but he actually preferred to sit on the floor a lot of the time, and he was also known to tip the chairs over and lean up against them. And while he might be lounging on the floor, he might be wrestling around with his sons, because he's actually in the Oklahoma Wrestling Hall of Fame. And they say he won about 300 matches. So he was very active in his youth. And then once again, if you look at these illustrations, we did our best to get the rooms to look as close as possible to the original when the Lincolns were living here. But both the wallpaper and flooring are period pieces that were available at the time. And then on the left-hand side of the room, you'll see a wooden box known as a stereoscope, and Mr. Lincoln spent about $20 on that stereoscope, or $1,000 in today's currency.
Wow.
And it's kind of like an old-fashioned VR headset or a Viewmaster. So they would insert those images into the box, look through the eye holes, and then see a 3D version of the image. It really does show us that spending money on things his family enjoyed was a high priority for him. Then next to the stereoscope, there is a chess set, not his actual chess set, but we did do an archaeological excavation around the house, and we found a broken off piece of a pawn, and we traced it back to this exact board that was available at the time. And then, do we have any animal lovers in the room?
Yeah.
Yeah? What kind of animals? Dogs? Any animals? Yeah? You like dogs too? So, you both have something in common with Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln loved animals, and he had one dog, a lab mix by the name of Fido. And he also was known to bring home a lot of stray cats on his way back from his law office. And his wife would joke that one of his favorite hobbies is cat collecting. So it could have been some animals running around here with the family, and they would have had a good time together in the sitting room. So next we're gonna make our way up the stairs, and I'll lead the way. But at the top of the stairs to the left, you'll see the guest room, and it does have the only original sleigh bed frame in the home. Any questions before we head on up?
Did the Lincolns keep the home when he was president?
Yes, so they were renting it out to different tenants, and then after his assassination, Robert Lincoln inherited the home. He was still leasing it out, but then when he found out that one of the tenants was charging people a fee for tours, he decided that he didn't really like that, and he gave it over to the state.
Oh.
Yeah, great question. In the guest room, the bed frame, both the chairs and the dresser are all original. And then when you're finished taking a look in there, we can all meet in the bedroom. All right, so here we are in the bedroom, and just a reminder that since the handrail has disappeared, we do ask that you stay on the blue carpet and keep a little distance from the walls and doors. But here we are in the bedroom, and this is where Mr. Lincoln would have slept, he would have shaved, he would have got dressed, but he would have also had some restless nights while he was here because states were still beginning to secede from the Union before he made his way to the White House. So while he was living here, he knew he had a very big responsibility ahead of him, and he may have spent a lot of late nights sitting at that desk right there in the corner, doing a lot of reading, a lot of writing, preparing speeches, and there's even some stories that his neighbors would see his candlelight in the window as late as 2 or 3 in the morning. And along with that desk, the wardrobe and the dresser are also original. The bed frame to my left is 6 foot 8 inches, long enough to fit his full body, but this is not his actual bed frame. After they did make their way to the White House, they did sell and store a lot of furniture, but they left some pieces in the home too. And so the original bed frame was left in the home, and the tenants who were here after the Lincolns took it with them to Chicago, and it was lost in the Chicago fire. So this is a replica, and it looks pretty close to the original. And then, looking around the room, how do you all feel about this wallpaper? Different?
With you.
It is really pretty.
You like it?
Yeah.
Some people love it, some people don't like it. And so this is the actual wallpaper that they would have seen on a daily basis. After the home was given to the park, a piece of it was still intact right up there in the corner. And we did some work on it and uncovered this pattern and traced it back to this exact wallpaper from a French catalog that Mary Lincoln had purchased it from. So it does say a lot about Mary and her upbringing because she came from a very wealthy aristocratic background. She had over 12 years of formal education and she was fluent in French. So compare that to Mr. Lincoln, who had less than 1 year of formal education and was primarily self-taught. You can see she did bring a lot of style to the home and perspective to the relationship. And behind me is Mary Lincoln's bedroom. And having 2 bedrooms might seem a little bit strange today, but back then it was a common sign of status that they had risen to that middle upper level of status to not only have, but to fully furnish 2 bedrooms. It was also very convenient because if he was up late working, she could go to bed early and not disturb him or be disturbed. So we're gonna go through Mary's room and then we're all gonna meet in the hallway. But yes, also I noticed that you were looking at the chamber pot beneath the bed. And so they didn't have any indoor plumbing at the time. So they did have these pots beneath the bed so that they could do their business in the middle of the night. They didn't have to run outside into the outhouse. So it was pretty convenient. But as you'll see when we go into Mary's room, she did have her own original commode and we were able to track that down. All right. So here in Mary Lincoln's room, you'll see the oldest piece of furniture in the home, which is that dresser that she brought from her childhood home in Kentucky. The chair in front of the dresser is also original, and then on the bed you'll see her actual shawl. And then her commode is right there in the corner. And then when you finish taking a look in her room, we can all meet in the hallway.
This is the kids' room.
But then after Robert graduated, he moved into actual toys that the boys would have played with. But if you look in that round container, you'll see some marbles, and some of those marbles were actually excavated from the backyard. So we do know that the boys played with marbles. And there's a lot of stories as well about the boys being really rowdy and mischievous and playing pranks on people. So it was pretty common for them to hop out that window onto the roof and throw firecrackers at horses. And they would knock people's hats off with fishing poles. And they would yell at people to vote for Lincoln if it was during election season. And there's a quote that Mr. Lincoln wanted to make sure the children were happy and unrestricted of parental tyranny, I believe due to the loss of his second son and then his own childhood experience. It was just important that the kids had a very happy childhood. And it made a big difference because Eddie had passed away at the age of 3, Willie passed away at the age of 11, and Tad passed away at 18. So Robert was the only survivor. And since the boys weren't very neat or tidy, the Lincolns also had hired staff to help look after them and help out around the house. And they would stay in that room at the end of the hallway. And the hired staff were typically younger ladies, mainly teenagers, but we do know that they had help as young as 8, as old as 75, and they came from different immigrant backgrounds. So Portuguese descent, African descent, Irish descent, and other European descent. And they would be paid a weekly wage of $1 to $1.50, or 50 to 75 a week in today's currency. And in that room, you'll also see the only original exposed floorboards. So that is the flooring that the Lincolns would have seen and walked on a daily basis. The wardrobe and the trunk stand are also original. And after you finish taking a look in that room, feel free to make your way down the stairs and into the kitchen for our final stop. Come on, kids. And this is our final stop on the tour. And originally the kitchen and the dining room were connected together as one room, but as the Lincolns expanded their home, it was Mary Lincoln's idea to build this wall here and separate the two rooms to instill some formal dining etiquette into the family. But in the kitchen itself, the only original artifact is this beautiful cast iron stove, and Mr. Lincoln purchased it as a gift for Mary about 6 months before they left for the White House. So it really does tell us that they did plan to come back at some point. And he paid about the same price for this stove as he did for the stereoscope in the sitting room. So about $20 or $1,000 in today's currency. And there's a story that she loved this stove so much, she wanted to take it with her to the White House. And he assured her that there would be stoves available in the White House. And it also weighs about 600 pounds, so it would have been very inconvenient to take with them. Unfortunately, due to his tragic end, no member of the family ever did make their way back to live in his home as they were renting out the house. Eventually, Robert inherited the home, and when he found out one of the tenants was charging a fee for tours, he was not happy about that, and he gave it over to the state for a grand total of $1 with 2 conditions. The first is that no one would ever have to pay a fee again to tour the house, and the second is that we keep it well maintained. And we were able to do both of those things. And the second thing to note about the kitchen is if you look around the room, you can see it's a very small kitchen. But this entire room is actually about the same size as the whole log cabin that Mr. Lincoln was born in and grew up in. And sometimes that cabin would hold up to 8 different relatives at a time. Wow. So it does say a lot about his humble beginnings and how far he was able to come to create this beautiful home for his family. And I hope through the tour you've been able to see Mr. Lincoln as more than just the 16th president, but also as the father, a husband, a neighbor, a wrestler, a cat collector, and a normal person like all of us. Any questions before we conclude?
Any questions?
No. Okay, great. Thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you.
This is the backyard. We do have an outhouse over here. This is their back porch. Hope you enjoyed the tour of Abraham Lincoln's house. This is a day with the Lincolns. The Lincolns were a family with the same hopes and challenges as many others in the neighborhood. The Lincolns lived a middle-class family lifestyle in 19th century Springfield. Abraham Lincoln spent long periods away from home on the 8th Judicial Court. For Mary, that meant running a household on her own. So her and the kids would be here by themselves while he was away working and doing what he was supposed to do to provide for his family, just like us. This is a close-up view of the outhouse. Nothing fancy, just a spot for you to sit down and drop a load. As Mr. Rogers would say, it's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. This view of the Lincoln home has been the most frequently photographed through the years. We invite you to step into history and take a photo from this location. This is the film, some camera equipment. Lincoln's home became a shrine. Lincoln understood the importance of making his image available for president campaign. Springfield photographer Preston Butler captured several likenesses of Lincoln during the 1860s election. And as we walk through the area, there are several signs showing the history. This is the Cornell House, and we're able to step inside, and I'm going to take a step through history and show you what's inside. As we enter inside this house, there is historical information. This is Charlotte Rodriguez de Zoa, 1815 to 1868. In 1931, de Zoa was honored at the dedication ceremony of Lincoln's tomb, an event that was attended by President Herbert Hoover. Here's a little video. And we have to turn the page for more. Little comic strip. This is Lincoln Springfield, Jameson Jenkins. We have more comic strips that'll tell you all about these characters. We have one on Francis Springer, Another one on Charlotte Rodriguez de Zoa again, Mariah Vance, William Dagon, and then it says follow the orange path above for chapter 2. We have some information on Henry Kerrigan, and Kerrigan owned a hotel that served as a temporary home for travelers near and far. This allowed him to take a wide variety of visitors. And let no feeling of discouragement prey upon you. In the end, you are sure to succeed. Then we have William Donegan. Donegan was a conductor on the Underground Railroad. He once helped a girl escape enslavement by disguising her appearance and voice. We have comic strips of him along the path to freedom. And here we have a quote from Abraham Lincoln, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And then there's information about ending slavery. Ida B. Wells, 1931, lynched under the shadow of Abraham Lincoln's tomb. Who was Ida B. Wells? Ida B. Wells was a civil rights and anti-lynching activist, speaker, and journalist who was born into slavery in 1862 in Tennessee and later moved to Chicago. And this is Maria Vance. At 19 years old, Vance was one of the organizers of the first African American church in Springfield, the African Baptist Church. We do have a comic strip that you can see. Another quote for Abraham Lincoln, you cannot fail if you resolutely determine that you will not. The better part of one's life consists of his friendships. Abraham Lincoln. In the mid-19th century, Springfield had a diverse population. Multiple languages, religions, and ethnicities influenced the lives of its residents. During his 24 years in Springfield, Lincoln was exposed to these varied backgrounds and unique stories of sacrifice, success, and struggle. The residents of Springfield shaped the years before his presidency and made a lasting impact on his view of the world. And this is just an informational chart about where people from Springfield came from. And these are the languages that they spoke. And right here, this is all the people that are part of this town. And this is the welcome sign. Welcome to the Knorr House. What is the Knorr House? The house you are standing in right now was constructed in 1849. Charles Cornell purchased the property 6 years later. Knorr was a druggist, and it is believed the Lincoln family purchased medicine at his store. He was also a member of the Whig Party, sharing that distinction with Abraham Lincoln. So if you come down to Springfield, don't miss this historic place full of history. All right, we are headed into the backyard, and we do have outhouse and a garden back here. And then we're back to the main area so we can explore more places. As we walk down the road, they do have several houses you can't actually tour, but they are here as a historical reminder of what was. But look at that, we got a visitor, a bunny rabbit. This is the Allen Miller house. Allen and Clarissa Miller had their house built shortly after purchasing the double lot in 1855 for $650. They and their 3 young children shared the house with Clarissa's brother, James Keyes, and his wife at the time. Miller was a prosperous leather dealer, as well as a dealer in stoves and tinware. James Keyes was a deputy United States Marshal. This is the house. And right here we do have a wagon, Union, Liberty, and Honor, an ad for People's Badge, Honest Old Abe, the People's Choice. We have some more houses. We're seeing history right in front of us. And if the fence is blocked off, we can't go inside, but we can still take a look at these historic masterpieces. And we do have a rock that says Robinson. We'll take a look up front. This is another wagon that would carry wood or goods. And this is the wagon right here. A lot of activism in the neighborhood. In this empty lot before you once stood, two small houses. The 1850 census tells us two families lived here. The Jenkins and the Blank shared walls and a common goal to improve the lives of African Americans. Both families became advocates for freedom through their activism. And we'll continue on and check out the last couple remaining houses on the tour. This is the cookhouse. This is another shot of Lincoln's home, but we actually are going to go right across the street from Lincoln's home and check out the Brown house. I believe we'll be able to go inside and take a tour of what this house has to offer. What a pleasant home Abe Lincoln has. Harriet Dean House. Exhibit entrance. This actually is not the Brown house. This is the Dean house. Harriet Dean house. And we'll see if we can go inside. Yes, we can. The Lincolns in Springfield. Nothing new here except my marrying, which to me is a matter of profound wonder. Abraham Lincoln, November 11th, 1842. He was 33 years old, and Mary Todd was 23 when they married. November 4th, 1942. What a pleasant home Abe Lincoln has. The Lincolns buy a home May 2nd, 1844. This is a model of the home. A portrait of Abraham Lincoln from May 7th, 1858. So this house is a historical look at Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln, Springfield. This is just a view of the town from the street point of view, so that's a map of the street. We're going to go ahead and check out the neighborhood. A Lincoln inventor. So this was one of Abraham Lincoln's inventions. On June 11, 1850, Lincoln wrote to Nathaniel Hay, a Springfield contractor, describing a brick retaining wall he wanted to build. This shows you what that concept looked like. They have information on the neighborhood and the people that lived around here. That we get a view of the family life of Abraham Lincoln. We get a view of Lincoln's children and what they were about. And here's Abraham Lincoln's children on the bottom. The Prairie Lawyer. This is Lincoln's time as a lawyer and the people that he worked with. There is vague popular belief that lawyers are necessarily dishonest. Let no young man choosing the law for calling for a moment yield to the popular belief. Resolve to be honest at all events. If in your own judgment you cannot be an honest lawyer, resolve to be honest without being a lawyer. Abraham Lincoln, 1850. Evening with the Lincolns. So this is daily life of what they did. Politics and expanding horizons. So this is Abraham Lincoln's political times. Farewell to Springfield. So this is all about when Abraham Lincoln left Springfield for Washington, D.C., when he became the President of the United States. We have another portrait of Abraham Lincoln, as well as a fireplace from that time period. And then the Lincoln remodel from 1855 to 1856. This is the boyhood home of Julius Rosenwald, noted businessman and philanthropist. This is the boyhood home of Julius Rosenwald, noted businessman and philanthropist. Boyhood home of Julius Rosenwald, noted businessman and philanthropist. This is the boyhood home of Julius Rosenwald. He lived in the house between 1869 and 1879. And we're going to check out the rest of Springfield and see what else we can find. Looking for Lincoln. That's some Route 66 shirts and Lincoln shirts to remember the time. Of course, we have magnets, hats, cool games, collectibles in this gift shop. Downtown, Lincoln Library, view of the buildings, and this is where the actual Springfield Museum is, which we did a video on. There's a lot to do in Springfield. We had to take several trips just to see everything. We still haven't done it all. I hope you enjoyed the tour of Abraham Lincoln's neighborhood. We are coming to the Oak Ridge Cemetery, 1860 to the 1900s, and this is going to be Lincoln's tomb. We're going to see Lincoln and his family and honor the 16th President of the United States, one of the greatest presidents of all time. This is Lincoln's tomb. We're going to go inside and see each of his family's tombs. Here we are at Lincoln's tomb. This is the surrounding area, and then there are other graves in the area as well, but this is historical. And here is the cemetery, and we're coming along the walls of Lincoln's tomb, and we're gonna go to the front and go inside and take a look. Welcome to Lincoln's tomb. Here's the door. We're going to go ahead and go inside now. In this tomb are the remains of Abraham Lincoln, 16th President of the United States. We have statues of Abraham Lincoln. And this is Lincoln, the Ranger. We're walking through his tomb. As we walk through, there's different portrayals of Lincoln through his lifetime. Friends, no one who has ever been placed in a like position can understand my feelings at this hour, nor the oppression and sadness I feel at this parting. For more than a quarter of a century I've lived among you, and during all that time I have received nothing but kindness at your hands. This is referring to Springfield, Illinois, where he lived for a long time, and he was brought back to Springfield as he was laid to rest. We have Mary Todd Lincoln, 1818 to 1882. Edward Eddie Baker Lincoln, 1846 to 1850. Willie Wallace Lincoln, 1850 to 1862. Thomas Tad Lincoln, 1853 to 1871. And we have the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, 1809 to 1865. President Lincoln's remains rest in this vault 10 feet below and just behind the massive Arkansas marble monument before you. The words "now he belongs to the ages" inscribed in the wall are said to have been uttered by Secretary of War Edwin Stanton at Lincoln's deathbed. Even have Braille, so if someone needs to, they can read it this way. We have Robert Todd Lincoln, 1843 to 1926, buried National Cemetery, Arlington. 407 years ago, our forefathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated the proposition that all men are created equal. This is from his great speech in Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, November 19th, 1863. A couple more statues as we exit out. We'll say it is definitely warm in here. We have a statue of Abraham Lincoln again. This is the last two. This is the speech from his second inaugural address on March 4th, 1865. This is the original entrance to the Oak Ridge Cemetery where Lincoln's tomb is, and this cemetery has Revolutionary War patriots. 3 patriots and their wives are interred in blocks 12 and 13 on the hill north of this site. So many patriots from the Civil War are here. This is the very first grave site for Abraham Lincoln, and it held the remains of Abraham Lincoln from May 4th, 1865 to December 21st, 1865, until they moved him to the new location that we just were at. All right, I hope you enjoyed Lincoln's tomb. This is the What's Up Dude signing off. Catch you next time. Please like, share, and subscribe so that I can explore new areas and go to more places in the future.